Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we continue our study of the second book of Kings. We are in the middle of chapter 9. We just read of the assassination that Yehu killed Yehoram, the king of the north. And now we are about to read of the fate of Ahaziah, the king of the south, who was there present at the same time as they had been allies. We are about to read verse 27. As soon as the Yehoram was killed and his body thrown into the field of Nevayot, Ahaziah, we turn our attention to Ahaziah Melech Yehuda, the king of Judah. Ra'ah, he saw what had occurred. Vayonos, and he ran Derech Beis Hagan through the garden, the pathway that led to the garden. Vayirdof Acharav, and he chased at Yehu, and so Yehu chased after him. Vayomer, and he said, Gam oso hakuhu el hamerkava. He too strike him dead, shoot him dead, while he is riding his chariot. In other words, just as had been done to Ahaziah. B'ma'alei gur asher et yivlaam, and do it at the ma'alei gur, the ascent, the mountain or the slope that leads up to the place called Gur, which is near the place called Yivlaam. Vayanas Megiddo, and he ran towards Megiddo, Vayamas Sham, and he died there, also assassinated. Vayarkivu so avadav Yerushalayma, and his servants, the servants of Ahaziah, carried his dead body to Jerusalem. Vayikbru oso, and they buried him bikvurato, in his grave, im avotav, together with his fathers. Be'ir David, in the city of David. Because remember, Ahaziah was a descendant of David. We're going to get back to Ahaziah and the kingdom of Judah later, but we're going to go back and focus on the northern kingdom and the coup of Yehu. So, however, before that, we're just reminded, Uvishnas Achas Esrei Shana, it was during the 11th year of Yoram ben Achav that Malach Ahaziah al Yehuda, that Ahaziah became the king over Yehuda. It's just a little side note, just to remind us of how Ahaziah and the southern kingdom, how the history kind of worked together. Vayavo Yehu Yisraelah. What did Yehu do now? Yehu now went back to Yisrael, right? After chasing Ahaziah and having him killed. Jezebel shama, and Jezebel heard. And what was her response? Vatosem bapuch eineha, and she put like eye makeup on her eyes. Vatete vetrosha, and she made her face and her hair look nice and pretty. Vatashkef ba'arachalon, and she looked out the window. The image of Jezebel reacting in this way, as if somehow getting dressed up all pretty will somehow she'll be able to use her charms. Remember how Yehu criticized her as using very, very graphic language, Zenuneha, right? Her whoredom is the best translation. It's deliberately versus use a crude description of her and her way, and having, he's coming back to kill her, and she's clearly thinking, well, I'll try to do this in order, maybe I'll somehow seduce him, or somehow he won't kill me if I look beautiful or something. It's just a very pathetic image being painted of Jezebel at this point. V'yehu ba bashar, one would think at least, I don't know, she'd try to run, I don't know, something. But this was her response. V'yehu ba bashar, and Yehu comes in the gate, Vatomer, and she says, and again, the same term, Ha-shalom, is there peace? In other words, even she is asking now, are we okay now? Me and you, maybe me and you can do this together. Or do you still want to kill me too? And what did she call him? She said, Zimri Horig Adonav. Is there any peace between you and I? You Zimri guy? Now, Zimri is the guy who was also was a military officer, and he led a coup against Baasha, who was a former king of Israel about 100 years prior to this, right? Now, so Zimri, but if you recall, Zimri didn't last very long. He ended up getting overthrown very quickly, right? He didn't have a lot of support. So by calling him a Zimri guy, By calling him a Zimri, it's like saying, you rebelled against the king. It's not going to last long. So let's just not continue with this coup here, and let's work together, because this is not going to last long. All you are is a conspirer, just like Zimri was. But unfortunately for her, this was not to help her. Vayisa panav al hachalon, and he looked at the window, and he sees her standing there, talking to him this way, and he sees the window. Vayomer, and he says, "Mi iti, me. Who is with me?" Right? Who is it? In other words, he looks around the room, and she obviously had servants standing there with her. Are you guys with me, or are you with her? Which one are you going to take? Vayashkifu elav, shnayim shlosha sarisim, and 2 or 3 of her eunuchs, right? A saris means a servant of the king, and literally means a eunuch. So 2 or 3 eunuchs, right, who were in charge over keeping her and guarding her, looked at him, Vayomer, and they said Shimtua. No, they looked they looked at him, and then he said to them, Shimtua, throw her out the window. Vayishmetua, and immediately they picked her up and threw her out the window. Vayiz midama el hakir, and her blood splattered, when she hit the ground, her blood splattered onto the wall via lasusim, and splattered on the horses, vayir misena, and the horses trampled her. So, and what was his reaction? And this is kind of unusual. And this starts to get, until this point, our heart was to some degree sympathetic to Yehu, and he's executing a corrupt and evil king, and even this execution of Jezebel, which didn't really have to go this way. It was pretty dramatic. He could have had her executed in a more normal fashion, but instead he had her thrown out the window. But then Vayavo Vayochal Vayesh, then he goes into the house after committing this act, and he sits down and eats and drinks and has a party. Which starts to get us to wonder about what kind of a person this Yehu was. He was the one who was loyal to Eliyahu, the prophet, so much so that God wanted to anoint him and asked to anoint him the king, to take over and be the messenger, the one who carries out the vengeance of God. He seemed to be close and have a relationship with the Bnei Nevi'im. He definitely commanded loyalty among the people. There must have been a lot of positive qualities. But he was also described as Mishuga, someone who was just crazed and not thinking, just acting out of such zeal without even thinking about what he's doing. And now, the person who doesn't think, the person who's not considering what he's doing, who just acts out of pure anger and pure contempt, now he just goes and sits down and eats. Vayomer, and he says, Piktuna et ha'arura hazos v'kivrua. After a while he's eating and drinking this, you know what? Go and take care of that cursed woman that we threw out the window. Go get her body and bury her somewhere. Like, give her some sort of respect, right? Kibatz Melachi, because she happens to be a queen, right? She's the daughter of a king, right? In other words, she herself is useless, but she's a daughter of a king, so let's respect her body. Remember, she was a daughter of a king of Tyre, of a foreign king, but nonetheless, she's, we should respect her body. Vayelchul cover, so they went to bury her. V'lo matzuba, and they didn't find any of her ki im hagugolas. All they could find was her skull, v'haraglayim, and her feet, v'kapos hayadayim, and her hands. Everything else had been devoured. Vayashuva vayagidulo, and they came back and they told Yehu, Vayomer dvar Adonaihu. This is the word of God. Asher diber bi'ad Abdo Eliyahu, that God spoke to his servant Elijah, Hatishbi the Tishbite Lamar, B'chelik Yisrael, that in Jezreel yochlu haklavim et bezari savel, that the dogs are going to eat the flesh of Jezebel. So yes, that was predicted by God, but just the idea that he does this and then sits down to party, and while he's partying, the dogs are eating Jezebel, and he didn't even have he didn't stop for a moment and say let's just bury her, because she after all was the queen. It's just a little bit disturbing, but things will get more disturbing as we read further. And again, this is continuing with the repetition of the curse that God had pronounced through Eliyahu against Jezebel, that her nevela, her carcass, right, shall be like like a pile of garbage, a pile of feces on the field in the portion of Israel. Remember, Israel is the area, is the region where that terrible corruption that was instigated by her, by which they trumped up the false charges against Navot and had him executed and took away his belongings. Asher leyomer, that they should never say Zos Jezebel. We don't want anyone to ever come to her gravesite and say, "Oh, this is Jezebel," but rather there's nothing left of her body to even go and have a shrine, someday down in the future. This concludes chapter 9, but it does not conclude the story of Yehu's coup. But we'll stop here, having concluded chapter 9. We're going to read chapter 10, which gets even more gory if you haven't had enough gore yet. And again, as I promised, we will go back and discuss the entire story of Yehu to get a little bit of a sense of what to learn from this. Thank you so much for studying this together with me. Looking forward to studying chapter 10 and the rest of this book of Kings. Have a wonderful day.